president can still
Yes.
fund
Now,
anything, essentially.
you don't
from the
find
list.
that unconstitutional because the allocation of budget, it is the power of the purse. It belongs to Congress, principally the House. Now what we are doing here in unprogrammed appropriation, it is the President now determining sino sa unprogrammed appropriation ang uunahin ko. You don't find anything wrong there?
From my perspective, Your Honor, I think there is a problem there because it's essentially a delegation of congressional authority of the power
Yes,
of
there's-
the purse
there's-
to the president.
Is that not an unlawful delegation? You're delegating power to the President to allocate funds. Na dapat yan, sa Kongreso yan. Yan ang the only source, the biggest power of Congress is the power of the purse. Ito, dinidelegate niya na because of this one to the President. You don't, so you agree with me there's something wrong there.
I agree with you, Your Honor.
No, ito lang. Ikasama
Yes.
yung mga utang.
Yes, Your
Pero
Honor.
hindi natatapos yan sa DBM. Dadalhin yan sa Kongreso. Sino may final say kung magkano ibibigay sa bawat ahensya?
Well, on the part of the executive, it's the president po, as NEP.
Now for letter B, this represents 50% national government share. I'll read letter B. 50% of the national government share from the income of PAGCOR as provided in PD 1869 as amended, provided that the funds raised for this purpose shall be transferred to Philhealth at the end of each quarter, subject to the usual budgeting, accounting, and auditing regulations, provided further that the funds shall be used by PhilHealth to improve its benefit packages. Now, do we have a computation of how much for, let us say, 2023 or 2024, how much is the 50% share of PAGCOR?
I think that will be available from the Department of Budget and Management.
Can we have an estimate?
Okay.
Can you have an estimate for, what year is that?
Your Honor, so based on our records, the 50%, the share of PhilHealth to the 50% national government share from 2019 to 2024 is an accumulated balance of 22 billion pesos, of which a portion has already been appropriated in the GAAs of 2023 and 2024, Your Honor.
So let us just make an estimate for the 5-year period. How much is it again?
From the 5-year, this is not an estimate. These are the collections that is going to be allotted to PhilHealth, Your Honor.
Okay.
For PAGCOR, it's 85.22 billion.
So 85, let's just put it at 85 billion.
Yeah. And for PCSO, if we're going
Later, we
Okay.
discuss later PCSO.
Okay.
So for purposes of PAGCOR, for the 5-year period, it's 85 billion. Section subparagraph B directs that the funds raised for this purpose shall be transferred to PhilHealth at the end of each quarter, subject to the usual budgeting, accounting, and auditing rules and regulations. And provided further that the funds shall be used by PhilHealth to improve its benefit package. If you collected, the share of PAGCOR, 50% share, does PAGCOR directly remit the amount to PhilHealth?
No, Your Honor. It is remitted to the Treasury in accordance with the joint circular signed by all of the relevant parties back in 2022.
Would you not consider that to be in violation of the law because the law directly mandates that the funds raised for this purpose shall be transferred to PhilHealth, not to the general fund?
Your Honor, this is actually one of the discussions between the national government and PhilHealth, and it was raised to the to the Department of Justice back then under the administration of our current Solgen. And the issue really is the reconciliation between those following phrases, subject to the usual budgeting, accounting, and auditing rules and regulations, and then the final provision that such amounts have to be included in the GAA and appropriated under the national government subsidy to Philhealth. So that was the point of contention, and with the ruling of the DOJ, all parties agreed in the joint circular I mentioned earlier na this is how we shall interpret or implement the provision of the law. But this was thoroughly discussed, arbitrated by the DOJ.
Okay. Now, the limitation there for the transfer of funds from PAGCOR directly to PhilHealth is that it should be subject to the usual budgeting, accounting, and auditing rules, as you have mentioned.
Yes, Your Honor.
The fact that it was coursed through another fund, which is the general fund, not directly to PhilHealth, is that a limitation on budgeting, accounting, or auditing rules?
Your Honor, as a general rule, all resources, all income of the national government shall be given to the national treasury. And if there is going to be a final destination, then it shall go through the various budgetary processes, including, of course, the inclusion in the GAA and whatever budgetary regulations issued by the DBM. COA
Okay.
as
So
well.
that is one, on my side, an issue, whether or not under this provision, the funds, the 50% from PAGCOR should go directly to PhilHealth, as I read it, because the provision is very clear. The funds raised for this purpose shall be transferred to PhilHealth, but subject to your interpretation. Now, another issue on this paragraph B. You mentioned that you have collected 85 billion for 5 years, representing 50%.
Yes,
This
Your Honor.
85 billion that was collected from PAGCOR and as directed under this paragraph B, did this amount go to PhilHealth?
Your Honor, in the GAAs of 2023 and 2024, there is an amount allocated in the GAA for those years, 21 billion each year. So for a total of 42 billion that included in the GAA. As far as I know, there has been no request for an NCA or notice of cash allocation from the PhilHealth to the DBM.
You're not answering my question.
No,
my question is, I want to repeat. Let us say for 2019, the collection from PAGCOR is, let us say, 10 billion. The 50% is 10 billion. Assuming you're correct, that the 10 billion went to the treasury first. Because, as you said, it is subject to budgetary regulation. But ang question ko dito, is the 10 billion that was collected from PAGCOR, did it went to PhilHealth? Because, as stated in this paragraph, the funds raised for this purpose shall be transferred to PhilHealth. The total amount shall be transferred to PhilHealth. Assuming that it passed through the national treasury, nevertheless, you have to keep that 10 billion and give it to PhilHealth as directed in this paragraph B.
Yes, Your Honor. Okay, the answer to your question for 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022 was that no, there was no transfer because there was no allocation in the GAA of those respective years.
So therefore, would you agree with me that you violated Section B? Because Section B said you have to transfer the government share, 50% of that. You have to transfer it to PhilHealth, regardless of whether you passed through the national government fund, you have still to give it to PhilHealth, the 10 billion.
Your Honor, the transfer is subject to the processes. So we cannot unilaterally bypass through all of those processes, especially the most important part, the inclusion in the GAA.
what are these pros? The only limitation mentioned is
Yeah.
usual budgeting, accounting, and auditing rules. That's the only limitation.
Right.
Does the actual withholding of the 50%. Kung hindi mo binigay yung 50% o nagbigay ka lang ng 5 billion, is that one of those limitation considered as budget, accounting, or auditing? Budgeting, accounting, and auditing rules are merely procedural. You have to prepare a ledger, you have to prepare everything. But the amount, the 10 billion, must still be transferred to Philhealth.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So the process, the standard process for such transfers goes as follows. Number one, such a line item must be included in the GAA of that year. If there is no GAA item, then there's simply nothing the Treasury can do because the Constitution commanded us that no money shall be paid out of the Treasury unless otherwise appropriated by Congress. That's the first requirement. The second requirement, Your Honor, is that even with that GAA, then the next step is for the Philhealth to request, through a special budget request from the DBM, the amounts that was allocated to them under the GAA. And of course, such a process will include documentary submissions, etc. Upon the successful evaluation of the DBM, then they will issue a document called the Special Allotment Release Order and together with the Notice of Cash Allocation that authorizes the Treasury to transfer such amounts directly to
Mr.
Philhealth.
Witness, your explanation is contrary to what is stated. Very simple English in paragraph B. Now let's go to, okay,
Your Honor, may I add something to
please.
the discussion? Section 37, the opening sentence says, the amount necessary to implement this act shall be sourced from the following, etc. Emphasis on the word necessary. The last paragraph of Section 37 speaks again of necessary. Could we have it flashed likewise, Your Honor? The last paragraph, I understand, of Section 37. Section 37. Which one? Your Honor, Section 37, last paragraph. The amount necessary to implement the provisions of this act shall be included in the GAA and shall be appropriated under the DOH and national government subsidy to Philhealth. I will not mention the last sentence anymore, it's not relevant. What I'm trying to say, Your Honor, is notwithstanding the identification of sources and the specific purposes for these funds, it would appear under Section 37, the opening paragraph and the last paragraph, that Congress is given the discretion to determine the amount as may be necessary to implement the provisions of the Universal Healthcare Act.
okay. I'll go to that later. With respect to the first paragraph, in relation to the last paragraph on the word necessary. But aside from PAGCOR, we have also the charity fund and contributions from PCSO. Same provision, nakalagay dito, that the funds raised for this purpose shall be transferred to Philhealth at the end of each quarter, subject to usual budgeting, accounting, and auditing rules. And I presume your answer to my question relative to paragraph B would also be the same for paragraph C.
Yes, Your Honor, but I would like to inform the Honorable Court that per our records, that amount remitted by PCSO for Philhealth as of end 2024 is about 6.84 billion pesos.
So with respect to B and C, you have your own interpretation. My simple reading of this provision says that the share of government in PAGCOR and PCSO, a portion of which supposed to be given to PhilHealth. Sabi ninyo, bawal yung direct remittance. Assuming bawal yan, dumaan yan sa National Treasury. But for B and C, sinasabi dyan na yung amount collected na yan, reserve yan for PhilHealth. You cannot touch that amount. You cannot reduce that. Yun ang understanding ko. You have a different interpretation. So that's an issue before us. Okay. Now, let us now go to the what Mr. Solgen mentioned with respect to the amount necessary. I'll read the last paragraph. The amount necessary to implement the provision of this act shall be included in the GAA and shall be appropriated under the DOH and the national government subsidy to PhilHealth. That's the first sentence. As mentioned by Mr. Solgen, the second sentence medyo hindi naman applicable. No? So, but this sentence refers to paragraph E and paragraph F. If you go to paragraph E and F, it refers to annual appropriations of the DOH included in the GAA. Letter F, national government subsidy to PhilHealth included in the GAA. With respect to letter E, that is the share of DOH to implement the national healthcare program. Is that correct? With respect to letter E, that is the share of the government has to give money to DOH for DOH to implement its
Yes, Your Honor.
program under the national healthcare program.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Letter F, it refers to the national government subsidy to PhilHealth included in the GAA. This refers, to my understanding, is the premium contribution of indirect contributors given by the government as included in the GAA. Am I correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Now, earlier, or for previous oral arguments, it appears to me that letter A, the increment sin tax collection, were used to cover letter F. Am I correct? That is what the government is doing. Collection from sin taxes.
Yes,
Yan
Your
ang
Honor. This will
ginamit.
be part of the general funds from which F will have to be implemented.
Yes. So apparently, on the part of the government, kung anong collection sa sin tax, or even PAGCOR, or even PCSO, yan ang ginamit pagpuno ng national government subsidy to PhilHealth. Am I correct?
Yes, Your Honor. That is
Okay.
correct.
These are sources.
But my understanding of 37 is totally different. Because 37 enumerates different independent sources of funding. Kung ang interpretation ng government is that the national government subsidy to PhilHealth included in the GAA as F would be sourced from A, B, and C, that paragraph or that 37 would appear as follows. Letter F, national government subsidy to PhilHealth included in the GAA to be sourced from sin tax, PAGCOR, or PCSO. Hindi siya separate A, B, and C. Ang ginawa ng gobyerno dito, yung A collection, yung B collection, C collection, yun ang binigay sa national subsidy ng PhilHealth on the part of indirect contributors. And then, ang tinatakutan ko pa, yung collection ng tatlo na yan, kulang na kulang pa. Mas konti pa sa binigay for subsidy. That is my understanding. If you read 37, because if we follow your understanding of 37 on A, B, and C, A, B, and C should be subparagraph of F. Hindi siya independent source of income or support for PhilHealth. What can you say?
We'll explain that, Your Honor.
If I may, Your Honor. Your Honor, it was already alluded to by I think the OGCC, but our records from 2014 until 2024, the syntax laws 10351 and of course 10346, 11346. Pardon if there's a wrong mistake in the numbering. The total allocation from the syntaxes that should be given to PhilHealth amounts to about 534 billion pesos for that decade, for that entire decade. But during the same period, Your Honor, the GAA has included in the subsidy component to PhilHealth an amount worth 635.36 billion pesos. So the difference between the two is 101 billion pesos. And it is this difference at 101 billion, it is the amount that is being referenced by that F. It is shall we say, a placeholder to account for the possibility that the government can provide more resources to PhilHealth, more than what the syntax collections are, depending, of course, on the need of PhilHealth. So that would be the factual context that I would like to use to interpret that provision. Then the second minor clarification, with your kind indulgence, Your Honor, is that B and C are not going to be paying for premium subsidies of indirect contributors. These are for the expansion of benefit packages. It is highlighted by the representative by the PhilHealth na pag nakuha yung B and C na yun po, sir, is going to be treated as a trust liability. Hindi po siya magiging premium contribution. So the treatment of the two will be different from the point of view of PhilHealth.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Now, so you're saying, with respect to A, the collections from A, the syntax law, what the government is doing is that the collection here in respect to A is the one that will be given in F.
No, Your Honor, it will be part of the amounts given under F.
Yes. So
Yes.
whatever is the subsidy of government to PhilHealth to answer for the indirect contributors, ang pera na yan, galing yan sa A. Yan ang sinasabi mo.
Galing po sa A plus other resources
Plus other.
of government.
Probably
Yes.
the bulk will be coming from A. Now, however, what I'm saying is that A is independent of F. Because Section 37 enumerates the sources. If A should be used to fill up F, A should be a subparagraph of F. That is how English should be made or crafted. Di ba? Ganun lang kasimple yan eh. Oh, now, with respect to B and C, may collection dyan sa PAGCOR, may collection dyan sa PCSO. Nasaan na yan? Was it remitted to PhilHealth? The total amount remitted to PhilHealth from the National or General Fund?
It is with the Treasury, Your Honor. Only 41 billion pesos has been included
So precisely.
in the GAA.
So what you're saying, nag-collect kayo sa PAGCOR, nag-collect kayo sa PCSO. Yes, a portion was remitted to PhilHealth, but not the total amount. Because B and C is very clear in saying that the funds raised for this purpose, PCSO, PAGCOR, Charity Fund, shall be transferred to PhilHealth at the end of each quarter, subject to the usual budgeting, accounting, and auditing rules. My understanding of usual budgeting, accounting, and auditing rules does not include reducing the amount. It may refer to creating a ledger, a journal, whatever it is, but does not include the power to reduce the amount collected from PAGCOR or even PCSO. Do you agree with me?
Yes, Your Honor. And
So therefore-
I would like to highlight that there is no reduction in the allocations going, set aside for PhilHealth under those collections. Whatever happens, 85 billion is still 85 billion. whatever happens, 6.8 billion is still 6.8 billion. What is at issue here is the timing with which those funds will be given.
No,
And,
the timing is stated here, at the end of each quarter. That's the directive there. So that it should be a regular thing from the national government to transfer it to Philhealth. So, I would like to know from Philhealth, natatanggap ba niyo yung pera from PAGCOR? Natatanggap ba niyo yung pera from PCSO? Now, very clear from BNC here that you should receive this quarterly to help increase benefit packages. Natatanggap ba nila?
no, because it's also
So therefore,
to GAA.
if they do not receive this, as you had admitted, my interpretation here, this was violated. Hindi kayo nagbigay ng pera sa PhilHealth galing sa PAGCOR or galing sa charity fund and Philippine PCSO.
Your Honor, let me go back to our previous discussion on the meaning of special funds.
Yes.
Yes, as I discussed yesterday, we have that kind of restrictions on special funds if they are actually created by law. So, in other words, while we have this provision stating that this amount should be allocated for this purpose, but it is likewise predicated on the necessity for determining that amount, which is the prerogative of Congress, then I guess, Your Honor, since there was no special fund created by law for these purposes, then it really goes into the general type of soft earmark, which means to say that this will have to be the policy guide for the Congress in determining the amounts to go to PhilHealth and to the Department of Health.
Yes.
So it retains that discretion, Your Honor, to determine the amount.
You mentioned special funds, so I'll go to that. I have a question there. Under the Constitution, dinefine naman yung special fund. Di ba? As long as the purpose is to collect, but my clear reading of the Constitution does not require that it should be created by law. Walang nakalagay dyan. If you go to the other provisions of the Constitution, may nakalagay dyan, as provided for by law, dynasty, as provided by Congress, etc. Kung gusto ng Congress yun, kung gusto ng Constitutional Commission din, they could have included a provision that a special fund will be a special fund if it is created by law, but nothing appears in that particular section. So therefore, if a simple reading of that provision, the requirement of having a law to back up the creation of a special fund that apparently government is insisting does not appear in the Constitution.
Yes, Your Honor, it does not appear in the Constitution, but the fact remains that laws were passed which made this a requirement. We're referring to PD 1234, to the revised administrative code. There are certain provisions on the creation of special funds. In other words, the general rule will be all income of government agencies will have to go to the National Treasury, except such funds as may be created, special funds, fiduciary funds, and same fiduciary relate special, and trust funds as may be created by law. So
Okay.
I agree with you, it's not in the Constitution, but the fact remains that there are laws that govern the creation of special funds.
Okay. I just thank you for your answers. I'd just like to follow up the question earlier with respect to unprogrammed appropriation from our amicus. My understanding is that, as mentioned earlier, you have a unprogrammed programs, but wala pang pondo. Within the year, kung may collection, whether debt, etc., additional taxes, yan ang pagpupuno ng unprogrammed appropriations, right? Okay. However, tapos na yung budget by then. Wala nang role ang Congress. It is now the executive that will implement it, right?
Your Honor, are you asking me?
No, siya na. Thank you very much for your answers. Okay na, you're free to.
Your Honor, on the question on sino yung mag-i-implement, yes, it's the executive
It is the
branch.
executive. So if within the year, kagaya nangyari dito, they were able to collect 100 billion from PDIC, in this 60 billion from Philhealth, it was the executive who allocated the money to the program appropriations.
Essentially, sir, yes.
Yes. So, kung meron tayong, let us say, sagaan natin, meron tayong 30 nakalista na ang program appropriation. The executive will now say, oh, itong pera na ito pupunta sa number 4, itong pera na ito pupunta sa number 8, etc., etc.
Yes, Your Honor. But for the special provision of the unprogrammed appropriations, I think Congress also specified a level of prioritization for what to fund.
So that's my question. In the program GAA, meron bang order of preference as to the program appropriations? Na meaning, let us say, may priority ba ang number 1 sa number 2? Let us say number 1 needs 100 billion. Nakakolekta ka ng 110. Yung 110 na yon, ibibigay mo lahat sa number 1. No discretion on the part of the President to choose number 5.
The executive branch can still do that po.
Yes.
Because the special provision, even if the special provision says that there is prioritization, it has a collatilla that says notwithstanding the prioritization, the President can still fund
Now,
anything essentially.
you don't
from the
find
list.
that unconstitutional because the allocation of budget, it is the power of the purse. It belongs to Congress, principally the House. Now what we are doing here in program appropriation, it is the President now determining sino sa program appropriation ang uunahin ko. You don't find anything wrong there?
From my perspective, Your Honor, I think there is a problem there because it's essentially a delegation of congressional authority of the power
Yes,
of the purse
there's-
to the President.
Is that not an unlawful delegation? You're delegating power to the President to allocate funds. Na dapat yan, sa Kongreso yan. Yan ang the only source, the biggest power of Congress is the power of the purse. Ito, dinidelegate niya na because of this one to the President. You don't, so you agree with me there's something wrong there.
I agree with you, Your Honor.
Okay, now, I would like to end my questions. But before I end, I would like to say something that I hope these cases before us, namura tayong mga tao, no? And from the President, very refreshing to hear that they want to get back the trust of the people. I give you all my support. Get the trust of the people. And increase their benefits. You'll be the next Secretary of Health. Thank you, Chief.
One of the petitioners availed of the Kaiser plan of the Supreme Court. You did not. So you're relying on Philhealth. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. But you're entitled to it even beyond the age of 80. We have made sure that justices of the Supreme Court should be covered by HMO until the age of 80. You may want to avail of it. Yes. You'll be excluded already? Oh. We can do that. We look at the lifespan of the living members of the court. Thank you very much, Your Honor. Anyway, so let me focus on a few things only. Can somebody describe to us the budget process? Because the issue is rooted on the provision of the GAA, who can help us the budget process. May the Secretary of Finance answer a few questions. Where's the DBM representative? Thank you very much. It will be very short questions. Everyone is eager to go home. I would suggest that all departments in the government, executive offices, should start procuring toga because of the number of cases being filed. So you have no difficulty switching. The toga is one size fits all. Anyway, please identify yourself for the record.
Good afternoon, Chief Justice and the Honorable Justices of the Supreme Court. I am Janet Abuelpo from the Department of Budget and Management, and I lead the legal and legislative group of the department.
Sakto. Pakisabi mo nga sa amin, please educate the court on the budget process. Paano siya nag-uumpisa at paano siya natatapos?
So, Chief Justice, as earlier explained, we have a general fund, and part of the general fund is done an unappropriated surplus of the general fund.
I want to describe, gusto ko marinig ng mamamayan yung pagproseso ng budget. Paano ito nag-uumpisa at paano ito natatapos? Para
Yes,
maintindihan nila ano bang pinag-uusapan dito. Kasi ito ay nag-uugat to sa special provision ng GAA. So ipaliwanag natin paano nag-uumpisa ang budget. Diba magpiprepare kayo ng NEP? Diba? Anong kasama ng NEP? Paki-identify what is NEP.
That's correct, sir. So I am proceeding from that
Sa umpisa
portion.
tayo.
That's the start, sir. And then from that, the economic managers, the DBCC, will come up with the annual fiscal, the total expenditure program. So it is the fiscal program of the government for the budget year, for example, for 2024.
Okay.
So from that po, we have the fiscal program, then we start with the budgeting process.
Anong cover ng fiscal program? Revenues,
Yes, sir.
expected revenues, income, whatever. Pakisabi mo, anong component?
It includes the macroeconomic assumptions, sir. Considering the macroeconomic assumptions, which can be better explained by Secretary Recto. But from that, sir, the deficit will be determined, the debt to GDP ratio, the revenue, the disbursements, among others, sir. So, yun po para makikita nila what can be part of the revenue that could fund the annual budget for the year, what is part that will be borrowed, the portion that will be borrowed, and also maintaining the deficit that is
So in
being
other words, ang unang
targeted.
titingnan nyo, income side.
Yes, sir, income side.
Anong kikitain ng gobyerno para mapondohan yung proposed na
Right, sir.
pagkakagastusan?
Right, sir.
Diba?
Yeah,
So pag
yeah.
when you analyze the sources of income, anong nakikita nyo dapat pagtingnan?
So, meron po, sir, na mga estimated tax revenue and non-tax po. And I think meron pong others na may ikatlo po na others. So, ine-estimate po nila yung makokolekta for a particular budget year. But that will also cover or consider, sir, what we call the medium-term fiscal program. And that's why we have the medium-term fiscal framework na meron pong covered years. So, 6 years, sir. So, nakaplano na po yan until 2028.
So kung na-estimate nyo na yung posibleng kuna ng resources o revenues, yung pagkakakitaan, anong susunod na step?
Then there is also that estimated expenditure na, sir.
Okay.
So, we come up with 2 tiers on the part of the DBM expenditure side po. The tier 1, which is the first level po, ito po yung mga continuing na expenditures. You have PS, you have the regular MOE,
Yes.
and you have the continuing capital outlay requirements po. And then the tier 2 would be the new or increased provisions in expenditures. So, having estimated those, i-compare po yan. So, titingnan rin po natin with all the parameters, doon po natin makikita ano pa yung kulang sa pondo natin, and that is where the borrowing would come in as well.
So nakita niyo yung pagkakakitaan at pagkakagastusan. So pag natapos niyo yan, anong mangyayari?
So after that, sir, we will do the actual budget preparation.
Okay.
So we will have the technical. We will ask the various agencies to submit their budget proposals, and they will have to defend them through the technical budget hearings.
So tatanungin niyo lahat yung ahensya ng gobyerno. Magkano ang kailangan nyo?
Yes.
Anong pagkakagastusan nyo? Submit nyo sa amin.
Basic-
Kaya hindi ipunin nyo yan. Okay?
Basically, Your Honor, they will defend the tier 2
Yes,
level,
yes.
yung pag-aagawan na po
Kailangan
nila.
Ipagtanggol nila yung kanilang hinihinging budget.
Yes
Di
po.
ba? Kaya may budget call tayo.
And yes po, it's more than twice po
Yes.
nung aming natitirang fiscal space. Kasi po na-compute na rin namin yung available revenues or receipts that you have minus the tier 1.
Okay.
Konti na lang po yung natitira sa tier 2. Yun po yung...
Pag natapos yung proseso na yan, anong dokumentong ihahanda nyo na ipipresenta nyo sa Kongreso?
We have under the Constitution po, we have the budget of expenditure and sources of financing. Yan po yung constitutionally required. But under EO 292, meron din pong sinasubmit ang Pangulo together with the BSF, yung President's Budget Message, the National Expenditure Program, the staffing summary
So,
po.
kinakailangan mag-submit ang presidente ng NEP. Ngayon, katabi niyan, libro na yan, yung budget, expense, something.
BSF, sir, in short.
Kinakailangan magkasama yung isasubmit sa Kongreso. Tama?
Magkasama po,
Ngayon,
Your
pag
Honor.
babasahin ng Kongreso yan, ang gusto ng presidente, ito ang pagkakagastusan. Sa kabilang parte, ito yung dapat, ito yung sources of revenue at saka yung expenditure. Ang tanong, hindi magtutugma yan, di ba? Walang
Yes.
panahon na magbabalance yan. Tama?
Yes, Your Honor. Hindi po
Hindi
sila
magbabangga
tugma.
yan. In other words, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Anong gagawin ngayon pag hindi magbabangga? Sino magdidesisyon para ma-adjust yung income vis-a-vis the expenditure?
Ang hindi po magtutugma ang BSF, Your Honor, sa NEP because the NEP is merely the expenditure side
Yes.
of the BSF.
Okay.
So, yung BSF po, meron po siyang sources of financing.
Correct. Yes.
So, meron po
Which
silang
include
iba-ibang
loans.
tables. Kasama po
Lahat
yung
ng-
loans, breakdown ng earmark funds, breakdown din
So,
po.
anong papel ng Kongreso pag natanggap niya yung dalawang dokumento na yan?
Ang tinitingnan po ng Kongreso sa kanilang evaluation at the outset na eventually kamuka ng GAA would be the NEP.
Okay.
The national expenditure kasi siya po yung expenditure side. But for purposes of evaluating everything, even the nitty-gritties po, the details as well as the macro, they will refer to the BSF.
Okay. So in other words, yung NEP na yan, kahit hingin ng Supreme Court na ito ang kailangan namin, pwedeng sabihin ng DBM, under NEP, hindi namin mabibigay yan. Tatapyasan namin yan. Kasi yung kikitain ng gobyerno, ito lang. Ikasama
Yes.
yung mga utang.
Yes, Your
Pero
Honor.
hindi natatapos yan sa DBM. Dadalhin yan sa Kongreso. Sinong may final say kung magkano ibibigay sa bawat ahensya?
Well, on the part of the executive, it's the president po as NEP. On the part of the legislative, we will submit it po to the lower house kasi po
Yun ang
the
sub-
bill should emanate
Yes.
from the
Under
House of Representatives. So they will later on start the legislation and issue the GAB. Yun po yung General Appropriations Bill, sorry,
Okay.
Your Honor. So that will be submitted eventually to the
So,
Senate.
Ang sistema, titingnan ng sources of revenue, titingnan, susumahin. Ano bang pangangailangan nating pinansyal? sa taon na ito. Okay? Ngayon, titingnan naman nila yung NEP. Sasabihin nila, ito yung proposal ng executive under the NEP. Ito ngayon yung perang expected revenue natin na sources of income. Tama pa po yan? Tama po yun?
Yes, Your Honor.
So ngayon, kung nakita ng Kongreso ito lang yung sources of revenue, ito yung NEP na sinasabi ng Presidente. Ang sabi ng Presidente, bigyan mo ang Supreme Court ng 100 billion. Sasabihin ng Kongreso, hindi uubra. Kasi base sa sources of revenue, hindi kikitain yan para matugunan yung 1 billion. Tama?
Generally, Your Honor, the answer would be yes,
So in
correct.
other words, everything rests at the end of the day, what to allocate to Congress.
Yes, Your Honor, because that is what we recognize as the
So when
power of
Congress
the
allocates
purse.
this funding, they consider all the sources of revenue covered by different legislation, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
So in other words, when nakita nila may specific special fund allocated, pero sinasabi nila, hindi natin pwedeng ibigay lahat ito kasi may iba pang pangangailangan ng gobyerno. So pwede nating bawasan.
Yes, Your Honor.
Pinapayagan ba yun sa Constitution?
Yes, Your Honor, as part of the legislation
Okay,
process.
thank you very much.